If you're listening to this, it's estimated you'll spend roughly 90,000 hours working in your lifetime. That's 1/3 of your entire life. If you're anything like me, you've probably asked, what am I working for? Maybe you've thought about quitting your job, changing careers, altering your relationship to work, or trying not to let your work rule your life. And if that's the case, this series is for you. Hey, it's Chad here, and welcome back to my series, What Are We Working For on a Level Deeper podcast. Retirement. I don't know about you, but it's something that I've thought about quite a bit, and specifically for me, I've thought about what I want retirement to look like, and is this traditional view of essentially the goal being to retire as soon as possible. I don't know if that's my goal or my intention. And by the way, how does retirement work anyway? The reality is that there's a very large financial component to our work lives. We work because we have expenses and we have bills to pay, and we also have wants and desires and things that we want to be able to spend our money on. And so some of the questions that we've explored in this series also revolve around, how does money fit into our hierarchy of values as it relates to our work? And once you start asking some of those questions, then there's this whole idea of retirement. And how does that factor into our work lives when we're young and as we start to age? Well, today I wanted to explore this idea of retirement. And first, I thought we should get some just technical background and understand some of the mechanics of how retirement actually works. So I reached out to my friend Demetrice Dawkins, who is a financial advisor, and he's going to give us a very foundational understanding to what retirement is, and from a financial standpoint, how it works. Here's Demetrice. All right, so Demetrice, for those who do not know you, give us a little bit of background on what you do for work, what you do for a living.
All right. I am the investment specialist for a Mass Mutual office in Michigan called Mass Mutual Great Lakes. There, I head up the investments and wealth management division for that office. Essentially, my responsibility is to educate advisors on different product offerings, different investment opportunities, different products that we have on our shelf, as well as assist them in presenting those to clients to really help lay out the foundation of their portfolio allocation as they're moving forward. So pretty much just an educator and someone who is really going to, lay the foundation for advisors in terms of their portfolios.
You mentioned education and an educator, and that's what I've come to know you as. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, is to hopefully educate both me and our audience and someone listening to this about retirement and the financial side of our work lives, because that is such a core element to why we have to work, is that there's the reality of we have bills to pay, and we have this view and this goal of, like most people do, of at some point being able to retire.
Mm-hmm.
I want to first talk to you about the mechanics of retirement. What is retirement, and how does retirement actually work? Because I think we often just assume it's like this rite of passage. Well, when I reach a certain age and I get older and I've worked for most of my career, at some point I can hang it up. I can enjoy my golden years traveling and sipping margaritas on the beach, and that could be the case, right?
Mm-hmm.
From my perspective, there's kind of like some ifs that you might need to get right in order for that to be the case. So tell us about retirement and how it actually works.
Well, it's interesting. Prior to the 60s, when individuals in this country worked with corporate America or worked for organizations throughout the country, they were largely entitled to a pension. And that pension would allow them, it would allow the company to pretty much put into a pool of assets that would grow over time for these individuals that would be available to them upon their retirement. So it really wasn't necessary for people who were working to really think about, oh, my retirement. I need to start saving. I need to start doing all these things and investing in things of that nature. But it wasn't until the 70s when the 401k became popular, when that came about. And it really started, we started to see the disappearance of the historical pension plan. And again, that was going to pretty much fully fund someone's retirement to a certain percentage of their yearly income for the rest of their lives. That largely went away. And it's interesting, Mass Mutual just did away with their pension, I believe, this year or last year. And they're focusing more towards the 401k. And the 401k says, hey, what we're going to do is we're going to contribute just a small portion into this pot that we're calling a 401k. We're only going to contribute up to maybe 4 or 6% match of your income. But that's only if you put in that as well. So now it is it's largely left up to the individual to say, hey, I need to start putting money in my 401k. The problem is this: no one really tells them what their bogey is. What is your target? Where are you trying to get to? Because that's going to largely determine how much do I need to be putting in. No one's having that conversation. So what happens is you end up working your whole life under contributing to a 401k plan. You go to retire, you realize that, wait a minute, my 401k isn't enough for me to live off of. My social security that we largely grew up banking on, thinking that was going to help subsidize a lot of that, isn't enough to even really give me 50% of the income that I've earned during my working years. And obviously, the goal of retirement is to be able to maintain that standard of living that you've become accustomed to in your working years in retirement. And if we haven't done that planning prior to such, then largely you might end up missing a mark. But when you get to 65, 62, 59 and a half, whatever it is, that age is that you decide to retire, there's no reset button. You can't get there and then say, oh, you know what? Let me hit reset. Let me rewind 30 years and start all over again. We don't have that option. So the only option you have is to say, hey, I'm either not going to retire or I've got to get a part-time job so that I can continue to live. So it is really important that we begin to connect those dots sooner than later, because the sooner you do it, the earlier you might be able to pull that timetable back and say, hey, you know what? I did want to retire at 65, but if I start planning now and start investing now, I might be able to do that at 55, might be able to do it at 50, right? So it is very important to have those conversations much sooner than later. And we largely tell people you want to do that with a financial professional because there may be some things that you're just not cognizant of. And that advisor will be able to bring that out for you.
So, as we look at the mechanics of retirement, the idea of retirement is we stop working, right?
Mm-hmm.
We stop
Yep.
earning an income.
Correct.
And so now, if we're not earning an income, typically throughout the course of our working lives, it goes earn an income, spend income that you make, set some aside for savings, enjoy that later. Okay, now we've reached that later phase. So our income has stopped. And now what? We are living off of the money that we have been saving, hopefully.
Hopefully, right? And so typically what happens is that money that you're saving all those years, you want to have that invested as well. You want to be able to receive a decent rate of return, something that's going to obviously outpace inflation, but also contribute to an avenue of growth for you. And once you do that, yes, now you've got this pot of money, right? So what I tell people is this: the best way to do it is to simply say, hey, we'll take easy math. We'll use $100,000 a year just for easy math's sake. So let's say you're making $100,000 a year upon retirement, right? Now, remind you, we're fast forward 30 years from now, right? So if you're going to retire at 65, I'm talking to someone who's 35 years old. And I'm saying, okay, so at 65, you're going to make $100,000 a year. All right. Typically, with an insurance company and our actuaries, we say that the most people and what we plan out for will live from the age of 65 to 95. So we factor in 30 years of retirement. So the next question we'll have is, all right, if you're making $100,000 a year working, when you're retired, how much of that income do you think you need to bring into your household to maintain that standard of living? So some people will say, you know what, Demetrice, I might need 60%, maybe 70% of that. So let's just go with 70%. So you need 70% of that $100,000 that you're bringing in the door, right? So if you take 70 and multiply that by 30 years, that's $2.1 million. So now you're saying, okay, so now I need $2.1 million to retire so that when I retire at 65, I can pull down $70,000 a year for the next 30 years and I won't have a thing to worry about. So now what you do is once you get to that point and say, okay, now I'm 35. How much do I need to save on a yearly or monthly basis so that by the time I'm 65, my investments into this 401k, into this Roth IRA, into this traditional IRA, into this SEP IRA will grow to the tune of that dollar amount there. And that's where we help to come in play and say, okay, this is what you're going to need to do. This is what you're going to need to invest in. And this is what your average rate of return is going to need to be over the course of that time frame to hit that dollar amount.
Now, I don't want to shock people. I don't want to scare people. This is for the purpose of education.
Okay.
And I think it also is important, right? You said 2.1 million. Now, everyone's situation in retirement and income requirements and the life that you want to live is going to factor into that number, right? And I just want to emphasize for people, like, in the idea of traditional retirement and being able to travel sort of as much as you want and really enjoy your retirement and have nice things, like, it's likely that in today's day and age, you will need to be a millionaire, if not multimillionaire.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's 100% correct. Absolutely. Because we also got to factor in inflation. And we saw what happened with inflation over these last couple of years coming out of COVID, where, and simply inflation is this, just so that everybody understands. A loaf of bread last year in 2023 was $1 a loaf. That same loaf from the same store with the same slices of bread, the same thickness, the whole 9 yards, is now a year later $1.10. So inflation simply is an increase of costs or goods and services for the exact same product year over year or a period of time over a period of time, right? So you want to be able to factor that in, right? So when you think about, and I know some people are saying, oh my God, I'll never be able to save $1 million. I'll never be able to save $2 million. With the right conversation, and that's where your investment advisor comes in. Because a lot of people feel as though, okay, I'm going to hire this advisor. They're going to tell me what to do, and then I'm just going to start doing it, and that's it. No, that advisor, you got to understand, is your financial coach. They are there with you as long as they're living, right? And if they go away, then someone else is going to take over that practice. They're going to do the same thing for you. But it's that coaching all throughout the years that we're going to be there with you. There may be some things that we need to make adjustments for. Hey, you know what? I got married. I want to, and I've had some children. I got 529s I need to start funding too. So we'll say, hey, okay, just some adjustments here. Let's add those accounts in. Let's figure out how much we want to start contributing there without necessarily affecting this pot of gold that we have set aside for retirement. You're going to get increases, raises.
529s
bonuses.
are for college saving, right?
Yes, well, education savings,
Okay.
because now 529s can be used for high school if the kids want to go to private school, elementary school, private school there, things of that nature. So you can use them for all educational expenses. And the great thing about the 529s, let's say your children go to college or go to trade school, or they don't go to college or trade school at all, and they don't use the money. Well, as of January 1st of 2024, you can now roll over up to $7,000 a year from that 529 plan into a Roth IRA for that child. So guess what? That money is not going to be penalized because it wasn't used. You can now simply roll that over into their Roth. And guess what? Now you're getting them started super early towards that retirement dream. So that's one really good thing that the government has done this year, is to create that opportunity for that rollover.
Hey, it's Chad here, and this is an ad for this show. I want to personally say thanks for tuning into the podcast. Whether this is your first episode or you've been here for a while, it means a lot that you're here. I'm not asking you for money. Actually, I'm asking for you to take a small action to help grow the show. More specifically, there's 3 things you can do to help grow the show and spread meaningful conversations like the ones that we have here. First is to leave a rating or review for the show on the platform that you're listening on. It takes about 10 seconds and can make a big difference. Number 2 is to subscribe or follow the show on whatever platform you're listening on, just so that you make sure you get notified of each episode that's published. Lastly, number 3 is to share the episode. Whether you send a text to a friend, talk about the episode at your next book club, or make a post on social media, sharing goes a long way to help. So thanks again for listening, and thanks in advance for taking a small action to help the show. Okay, back to the episode. I want to ask you about one other, I don't know, sort of equation. You talked about, we used to have the days of pensions where essentially employers and the government together were kind of providing people's future retirement funds for them. It was kind of like, hey, we'll take care of this for you. And then when you reach this retirement age, it was a little bit more guaranteed that you will have this money. Yeah. Okay. And then we had the shift of the 401k. The 401k is kind of like, well, we're going to help contribute if you also help contribute into this. So now the responsibility shifts a little bit more onto the individual themselves to provide for their own retirement. I want to add one more part of the equation, which is people like me. And I'm like, I'm self-employed. There's no one matching my 401k investments over here.
Right.
I'm just curious about, in the rise of self-employment, in the rise of the contractor economy, the gig economy, where the focus continues to shift on the individual themselves. I guess I just wanted to hear you maybe riff on that, because that seems like that is maybe the newer shift in the last decade or so, is that this whole 401k setup of people being full-time employees, that's not always the case either.
Yeah. It's interesting because we are in this whole gig space now where things are changing so drastically. And I think that really goes back to the value that I think this generation or the last few generations are putting on work. Because for them, it's not something that I feel as though I have to do. It should be something that I want to do and something that I enjoy doing. And so we're seeing a lot of folks get out there and just curate businesses on their own. And when you're doing that, this is where it also becomes really important that you are seeking counsel from an advisor, because you now have the opportunity to contribute to things like a SEP IRA or a solo K, which is a individual 401k, right? And they both have different benefits, pros and cons of each. But with the SEP IRA, it gives you that opportunity where it doesn't limit you to, say, obviously we're in 2024, a $7,000 a year maximum contribution. You can do up to 25% of your income, or $69,000 per year contribution to that SEP IRA, the lesser of those two. So there are opportunities. Now, granted, there is no one that's going to contribute to that and assist you. But because of that, because you're a business owner, it gives you the opportunity to invest a lot more than you would in a company-sponsored 401k or an individual IRA. So there are those opportunities. And again, there is no matching contributions for that, but you do have a higher limit.
So from my perspective, I think especially people, when I look at myself, I look at some of my peers, people that are my age. I'm 30. I am finding that we have different views, as you said, of work and the role that we want work to play in our lives. And we also have, I think, different views on retirement. Again, speaking for myself, I don't view the only role of my work is to make enough money so that I can retire as soon as possible. That's not my general outlook about work or retirement or my life. I want to be able to work in a way that fits my lifestyle and the kind of lifestyle that I want to lead. For people who are familiar with the show, that lifestyle for the last 2.5 years, or familiar with me, has been living in a van and traveling the country. And I've wanted my work to be able to afford me the opportunity to live that lifestyle. When I think about retirement, I don't want to necessarily wait until I'm 60 or 65 to do some of the things or enjoy some of the things that might traditionally come with retirement. So I think of it as more of like, well, I want to take some of the things that I want to do in retirement, and I want to figure out how I can prioritize doing those things now while I'm young and while I can. All of this to say, I guess my question here is, are you seeing that as well from your end, as far as people viewing work and retirement differently than they traditionally have? And from a financial advisor's perspective, how are you working with people who might be defining retirement differently?
1000%. 1000%. We're seeing that shift. America is seeing that shift, right? We're living in an era when we can't find enough people to do the jobs, right? I remember, especially like as we were coming out of COVID, passing by these warehouses, Amazon warehouses. We're going to give you a $10,000, $15,000 sign-on bonus after 90 days if you come and work for us, and so forth and so on. What I think is particularly important is that we've started seeing this shift of what work looks like. But not only what work looks like, but what does my life look like? Because I think people are becoming more conscious of the fact that, hey, by me working every day for 40 years to enrich the lives of these CEOs, these VPs, these presidents, just so I can hopefully retire at the tender age of 65 and live my rest of my lives in the lap of leisure, I think is largely going away. People are now saying, whoa, 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 wait a minute, because there's so much transparency these days. You go back 20, 30, 40 years, there wasn't transparency. People were working because that's what they knew they had to do. But as things became more transparent, people started seeing things differently. Say, wait a minute, who says I have to do that? So I think one good thing about your generation, the generation of folks today, is that they have no hesitation whatsoever challenging the norm. And I think that's so critically important for our mental well-being and our betterment. And I love that. So as an advisor, I encourage that, right? Because for me, I don't have my my iPad with me, but on my iPad, on my Apple Pencil, I couldn't fit it all, but all I could fit on there was a life by design. That's my slogan. You have two choices in this world. You can live a life by design, or you can live a life by default. You make the determination what it is that you want to do, right? If you have a game plan, if you have a dream, goal, or desire, you can achieve it, right? And it's the same thing I tell people with their financial planning. You need 3 Ds. You need the desire, you need the discipline, and you need the dollars to achieve it. If you have those three things, I can get you to where you need to be. And it's very similar to the workforce today with a lot of these young people and a lot of people in the world today who are saying, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired of punching a clock. I'm tired of reporting to someone else. I'm tired of going to someone every year and says, hey, man, we've had a great year. What do you think my bonus or my raise is going to look like? So we're doing this tap dance towards the end of the year to ensure that, we're going to hopefully get our worth from a company. And I think people are just says, hey, you know what? I'm done with that. Let me do this on my own. So kudos for that. At the same time, we can still help you to achieve that goal. So when we look at this, it's like, and that's why the first question I ask someone is, what does retirement look like for you? I don't want to go in with the preconceived notion that, oh, you're going to retire, you're going to work for 40 years, you're going to retire at 65, you're going to sit in your house on your rocking chair and maybe take a vacation once a year, maybe give a couple dollars to the grandkids and so forth and so on. So that's why I ask everyone, what does it look like for you? Because each financial plan is going to be different. If you have an advisor that you're working with and every single plan is the same and they're telling you what you should be doing without listening to you about what it is that you want to do, what's important to you, then you need to find someone else to work with. Because remember, this person is going to be your coach. When you feel as though, oh man, you know what? I don't know if I should keep doing this. Oh, the markets are looking weak. Should I keep pouring money into my 401k? That's where your coach is going to come in and says, hey, listen, how are we doing? How are we feeling? I want to meet with you at least 2 to 3 times a year. But then on top of that, I'm just going to call you sporadically, see how you're doing. And I want you to do the same to me. Right. So yeah. So we are adapting the way that we're managing assets and having those conversations with people today in order to get them to the dreams of tomorrow. Because sometimes it's not just about retirement. It says, hey, I want to start saving for the next 10 years because in 10 years, I want to start a business and I'm going to need seed capital. All right. All right. Great. Let's work a plan of how we're going to create and save that money and invest it to get there. So it's not necessarily always just about retirement. because on that route to retirement, we're going to have these other incremental goals that we also might need to hit. So yeah, we're definitely working and encouraging folks to do that. Absolutely.
As we wrap up our conversation, I guess just to spit back a couple of my main takeaways, I think number one, and I talk about it often on this show, it sounds like, it's important for us to have an idea of what we want our lives to be and look like. You talked about this idea of living life by design or living a life by default. And if we are not designing and actively thinking about our lives, then we are going to, by default, live a life that's sort of handed to us or one that we might not choose. So
Right.
that feels like something
Right.
that's really important.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Another thing that I took away from this is, in doing that exercise, that can give you a little bit more clarity maybe as to what that definition of retirement means for you. And
Right.
that might mean your path to getting there could be different. And my third takeaway would be that might be a great opportunity for someone listening to this to partner with someone, to partner with a financial advisor, a coach who can be with
Yeah.
them in this process and help
Yeah.
them understand what their definition of retirement or their
Yeah.
future is, and then help them get there. And so it's kind of on us, maybe as the consumer, to be aware of. I think this helped teach that you're going to find different financial advisors who might have different approaches.
Absolutely.
Find someone who fits with the vision that you have and someone who is willing to adapt to your needs. Is there anything
Yeah.
else that you would add or any other final
Yeah.
message that you would have to someone listening to this conversation?
Yeah, there's a couple things. One, I would say, don't be afraid to interview a financial advisor. Don't be afraid to do that. Say, hey, listen, I want to come in and talk to you, see how you work, understand your process a little bit. Because I am in the mode of selecting someone, and I've got 4 or 5 different people that I'm going to be speaking to. So I'd love to see how you operate just to make sure that we vibe. I tell my clients in the very first meeting, we need to make sure that we can work with one another. It's not a one-way street. I have to be able to work with you, and you need to be able to work with me, right? And then two, I will say, um, I've tried to stop using the term financial advisor, financial representative, simply because there's this negative connotation that a lot of people will have in their minds. It was interesting. I was talking to someone this week, and I say, "Hey, how do you introduce yourself if someone asks you what you do?" He says, "Oh, I'll tell them I'm a financial advisor," and then I'll say, "Well, are there any follow-up questions once you say that, or does that person immediately walk away?" And it's likely that person, there's going to be no question. They're going to walk away and say, "Oh, I know what this guy's about," right? Because a lot of people have an issue with understanding the compensation structure with working with a financial professional. Now, we'll go out and we'll obtain an attorney, and we typically never try to negotiate those rates with the attorney. We're going to go to the doctor. We'll never negotiate the rates with the doctor. We'll go to the grocery store. We'll do whatever. But when it comes to working with a money manager, a financial coach, your financial advocate, we get a little shy because we're uncertain of, hey, what does compensation look like? How do you guys get paid? How much am I going to have to pay you? Do I need to write you a check? So I would tell people, ask the question, ask them. Because the one thing you don't want to do is not move forward because you're concerned about how much money this person is going to make, right? I love cars. I go car shopping all the time. In the 50 something odd cars that I've bought in my lifetime, not one time has it ever been disclosed to me, or one time have I ever been able to figure out how much that dealership just made off me. I have no idea. But guess what? We're all driving cars. Why? Because we need it. We all need a financial coach, but we all don't have one because we're concerned about the lack of transparency when it comes to their compensation and how you're going to pay for them. So ask them the question. Don't be afraid. Hey, tell me how you're compensated. How does this work? Because I just want to make sure that this is something that I can comfortably do. But I will say this, do it, because it is going to be a dollar well spent. If someone can help you maintain the standard of living that you become accustomed to in your working years in retirement, how valuable is that to you? How valuable is that? They're going to help you achieve your dreams. So whether it's 65, 62, 59 and a half, or 45, if someone can help you meet that goal so that you can live the way you want to live in your retirement years or your leisure years or your I'm not working for anybody years, I don't, whatever we want to call it today, let's do it. Because I promise you at the end of the day, it's going to be worth it. But make sure you interview these people to make sure that they fit and they understand who you are and what it is that you're trying to achieve in your life. If not, go to the next one. There's thousands of us out there, thousands of us. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Demetrice, thank you. Thank you for investing your time with us. And
my pleasure.
Thanks for the education.
Thank you. Happy to do it.
All right, my friends. So now we've got a mutual understanding, at least of how retirement works from a more technical standpoint, from the financial side of things. And that leads us then to the next question of, okay, if we understand how it works, well, what do we want retirement to mean? What do we want it to be for us? And, what's our goal? I found that people can be all across the spectrum. People look at it very differently. On one end of the spectrum, you've got people who might want to work as hard as possible or save or invest as much of their money as possible so that they can retire as soon as possible. On the other end of the spectrum, you might have people who don't save as aggressively, or maybe who just view retirement as a different thing, something that they don't want to come as soon as possible. Or maybe their view of retirement is not the traditional stop working and kick your feet up and relax. So I wanted to have conversations with people who had approached this very differently. First up, I wanted to share a conversation that I had actually previously on the show with a guest named Adam Harper, who had retired at the age of 37. After his retirement, Adam and his family moved down to Costa Rica, and that's where I had this conversation with him. And he shared some of his story and experiences around pursuing and achieving a very early retirement. Here's Adam Harper. It's a Wednesday. You're going surfing. You are retired. Take me through what retirement means for Adam.
Well, Adam's a little bit of an extreme case. My wife will tell you, she's like, I don't understand how you just have all the energy you do. She's like, she thinks I have something wrong with my nervous system. I'm like, I don't. I just, all right. So a day with Adam, I wake up probably around 5:36, and when I was in Florida working, I would get up around 8, and I didn't want to get up. Like I could sleep till whenever. I was not a morning person. Went to bed late. Something about Costa Rica, you go to bed early, you wake up early. So I get up 5:36. I chug some water, have my fish oils, go for a beach walk, 3 miles, give or take my dog, wear her out, come back, do a little yoga, play with the kids in the kitchen while they're eating, talk to the family. And then I drop the kids off at school. I'll go do my workout, hour and a half. If I'm surfing right after, I'll just cut it to an hour and not go too crazy because I hate cramping in the water, surfing and having no energy. So I'll surf in the morning. If it's good, I'll come back. I'll jump in my ice bath for 3 minutes or so, have some vitamins and some of my homemade collagen. And I'm a real big health nut too. I make collagen out of my chicken feet every week. So I'll drink all that. Then I'll go for like another 5-mile walk. I'll come back. I'll make a healthy lunch. And while I'm walking, I'm doing podcasts or I'm listening to books or I'm practicing Spanish because I'm like determined to fluently speak Spanish, and it's hard. So it's really, as you get older, if I was my kid's age, I'd probably pick it up a little quicker, but right now it's a little more challenging. So I got to really reinforce it and get that neuroplasticity of rewiring my brain or wiring it so that it sticks, and it's challenging. So I will then come back, get my kiddos from school, and then I either try to take them surfing or I take them to tennis. If it's rainy season, so if none of the above work, I will come back home with them and just hang out for a little bit. Like I don't watch TV during the day. I haven't watched TV once in the 3 years. I have not napped once in the 3 years. I just haven't stopped. I walk 10 miles a day on the beach. I work out like a madman, and I am just always trying to challenge my mind and keep learning because people that retire usually, unfortunately, they either don't exercise or they don't keep challenging their mind. And that usually leads to an early grave. And I do not want to do that. So I'm always keeping myself busy, too busy, some people would say.
What is your definition of retirement?
Having the time to do whatever you want to make yourself happy and others around you. So like for me, it's just being able to do what I want when I want and spend more time with my kids. Cause I mean, unfortunately the American dream is, you work till you're 65 and you hope to retire. And unfortunately during the way you're too tied up with making more money to buy more things you don't need, which usually equates to less free time. And it's all about the time you have with loved ones and yourself, because you can't ever get that time back. You can always make more money, but you can't get that time back. So I think that's it's a hard lot. It's balancing that it's not easy. I mean, it's easy for me to say it now, but when I was working full time, I didn't get to do like the family stuff so much because I was like just obsessed with getting to where I wanted to be with the business. And I knew that it was going to take, a lot of hard work and time away from my family. But in the end, I knew that I was going to be able to retire and do what I want with them for the rest of my life. So it worked out. But retirement, free time, the time to do whatever you want. That's it. Short answer.
Yeah. I mean, what is your relationship with some of the sacrifice that you have to make? So it's like, the end goal and result is having the free time, being able to choose what you want to do. And it sounds like that required a period of your life where maybe you didn't have as much free time. You were very committed to your work. Maybe you weren't as present with your family. What's your relationship to some of the sacrifice that you have to make? Because it's kind of funny, it's like if we want more free time, we want to be with family, we want to have these things, but we're going to maybe forego it for a period of time in order to get there. Do you view that sacrifice as it's worth it?
It is, but it's also like, I mean, I get how most people can't just say, I'm going to sacrifice now, because you sacrifice now and you might in 5 years be in the same spot, just sometimes their sacrifice is just enough to put food on the table. So that's a different beast in itself. But I do remember taking vacations and stuff with the kids and them always being like, Daddy, why are you always on your laptop? Or why are you always working? And it killed me inside. But I'm like, because if Daddy's not doing this, we're not doing these trips. And Daddy's going to have to work the rest of his life. So I did always tell him, like, I'm doing it just because I know what I can do right now. And if I sold on Amazon. So I just knew the iron was hot. I knew that if I just kept grinding the way I was grinding, that I would see the light at the end of the tunnel. So I did make that sacrifice. Now, in the case of someone that doesn't see the light at the end of the tunnel, for example, and knows that, or let's say they work for a dead end job or a job that, you can only go so far on. I don't really see the point of giving that business or entity all of your energy for them to just, at the end of the day, they can get rid of you in 2 days and have you replaced. And then you just sacrifice all of your energy throughout your life to this company that unfortunately doesn't really need you. And that's almost everyone that works for someone, I mean, there's very few loyal employers that are going to look out for you to the end. So in my case, yeah, 100% worth the sacrifice. Cause I mean, I got it so good. It's not even, I almost feel bad talking about it.
Well, but as you've just said, you've sacrificed along the way. I think that's the common denominator in any life that you're going to choose, where you are choosing happiness. You're choosing something that makes you feel fulfilled. You're going to have to sacrifice something. I'm always a big believer in that. Like, you can't always just have it all. So you made sacrifices to get to the point where you're at.
I did. And my wife would always get mad at me. And I didn't handle the stress great either, to be honest, because it was like a 24/7 thing almost. People hit me up all the time and problems all the time. And it's just, I was miserable. I hated my life doing that business, just because I kind of let it consume me. But also, if I didn't let it consume me like I did, would I be as successful as I am? I don't know. I wouldn't trade anything. I'm glad it worked out the way it was. And I got to backtrack. I wasn't really slaving so much to it when I had children, but before the kids, me and my wife were both working 70 hours a week, and it was brutal. But sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
It's interesting, I think that the big thing that shifted my perspective was I lost my dad when he turned 50 years old. And
oh man, I'm sorry to hear that. That's hard.
For me, yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that. For me, it gave me the perspective shift of like, there's also the element of the time that we're assuming we're going to have in the future may
Right.
not be guaranteed.
No, it's definitely not. Not even close. And even if you do make it to 65, what kind of health are you in? Where's your mind at? Where's your body? Can you still pick up luggage from the plane at 70 years old? Can you still walk? Can you still, have conversations about the past, or you forgot everything? And the way the U.S. is trending right now, it's not looking good. Everyone is dying early or getting sick earlier, or it's pretty sad to see. And people like my stepmom, she's like, I am going to live my life when I get to 65. At 62, she got lymph, what is it? Cancer of the blood, lymphoma. Shoot, I don't know, a really terrible cancer. And she's like, probably definitely wish she would have listened to me when I've been the past 10 years of me saying, start living your life, don't wait for it. But yeah, so it's so sad to see so many people want to wait until this happens, or they get this promotion or get something like that, instead of just living in the moment now and sacrificing maybe a little bit money down the road, or some of your savings to go on that trip now, or to, as long I'm all for trips and memories and stuff, but I'm not for like gifts and cars and stuff you don't need, because that just sets you back farther in life. The rat race of America is getting more money to buy bigger homes and stuff you don't need, and getting more in debt, paying more interest. And that just sets you back. That means you got to work an extra 5 years, 10 years. It's just mind boggling that people don't correlate those things to meaning you got to work longer in life. Like, this should be about retiring as soon as you can, enjoying your life as soon as you can, or finding that balance along the way. So some people can do both, and some people have a job they love. So kudos to those people that can find the balance, because that's hard to find. And I don't think I had it great when I was working.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. My wife and I have been talking about that recently, as far as like, there was a period in my life where my mission was also to retire as soon as I could. I started my career working for General Motors, and then I ended up wanting to pursue different routes and have my own business so that I could have more control or option over the ability to. But my main mindset was, I want to retire, which to me, retirement, that's why I asked you, it's just interesting to hear how people view, like, what is retirement? To me, retirement meant I don't want to have to do this work anymore. I think some of it was because I didn't really enjoy the work itself, but retire as soon as possible so that I could make choices and do what I wanted. And it's interesting. In many ways, I feel like, I just turned 30. In many ways, I feel like I am living the life I desired or said that I wanted in retirement. I live in a van. I have for 2 years. My wife and I travel full time. We're in new places every single day. I've seen 49 states. We're making another trip up to Alaska. And so it's just kind of interesting. Like, I'm not retired. I still have to work. I still need an income. I'm still working on building a business. It is work that I enjoy. It is my own business. And, it's just got me thinking about, like, what does retirement mean for me? What will that look like for me? In many ways, I have a lot of the elements of what people seek in retirement at this moment. And so it's just kind of an interesting conversation to think about. And it feels like we're kind of moving towards maybe a different definition of retirement than what we're maybe used to. Do you feel like that's happening?
Yeah. I think so. I mean, for the majority, our parents' retirement was, you live off Social Security at the bare minimum, just scrape by and don't really do much. That's not really my idea of retirement. I want to go to a place. I know they go to Florida, but my grandma, for example, she went to, like, I don't know, some central Florida where there's no beach, and like, that's not my idea of living out the rest of your life like that. I don't know. I love to travel, so to me, being able to just go wherever I want, whenever I want, is kind of fun. We literally just got back from France for 2 weeks. So yeah, to me, retirement's traveling, seeing the world, and just living every day the way you want, and living it as long as you can. Making choices today that's going to get me to 90. Like, that's it.
Yeah, man, that makes sense. Well, Adam, thanks for joining me on the show, and thanks for sharing some of your story with me and with all of us. I appreciate it. So if Adam's story represents one end of the spectrum, then what about the other one? The one where retirement isn't a goal or a finish line to reach as soon as possible. What about that equation? Well, I reached out to someone who has become a friend of mine. Her name is Gail Goodman. She's someone that I met professionally and we've done some work together, but I've always really admired the love that she has for what she does. I'll let her explain what her profession is, what her career has been made up of. But in particular, Gail is beyond a traditional retirement age. She could have hung it up, and she's decided not to. She's still working. She's still going. That fascinates me. So I reached out to Gail to have a conversation with her, and what ensued is what you're about to listen to, and I'm just going to kick it to her, and she can tell more of her story. Here's Gail Goodman. For those who don't know you, describe what it is that you do for work and what you have done for work. I mean, you've created an incredible career, and tell us about what you have been doing over the course of that career.
So for the past 30 to 35 years, I don't exactly remember when I started. I have been a phone teacher, specifically teaching salespeople, direct salespeople, how to get on the phone to set the appointment so they can sell in person. I don't teach selling over the phone. I teach appointment setting. Through the series of different people responding to my prospecting in the beginning, I became very attached to the financial services industry for a couple of reasons. One, the need was very great. Despite all the great training they provide, nobody knew how to teach appointment setting, which is the beginning. A, you have to have prospects, and B, you have to have appointments, and there's nothing else if you don't have those two things. The other advantage is that this is an industry that believes in training, believes in paying outside consultants, and my attachment to the industry, which I shared with the group I was with yesterday, is pretty profound at this point, because I think that financial advisors do a very wonderful, noble thing. And I don't think most Americans understand what they do, which I probably said to my group yesterday 30 times in the course of the day. And you have to keep that as the basis for your understanding why people act so weird to you over the phone. But I also, through my relationship with the industry, developed customized scripts that cover just about every type of prospect you can imagine. And the only custom scripts they need, which I always offer myself to help with, is how do you explain your career change when perhaps you were a professional golfer, or you worked in the prison system, or, I mean, the list is endless of people that I have known who moved into financial services and their family kind of looked at them weird and went, huh? And you have to explain yourself over the phone. Those are very long phone calls. And when I was talking to the class yesterday, I said, so when I do these custom scripts, what do you think the first thing I'm going to ask you is? And they knew what it was. Why did you make the change? So having people know why they did a very difficult switch, no matter what you were doing before financial services, is very hard. There's a lot to learn. Americans are resistant to talking about their money, blah, blah, blah. Being very precise with your words on the phone happens to be more important because of the issues around being financial advisors. And they're wonderful people. I have gotten tremendous gratification from it because I'm teaching them a critical skill. And it really frees up a lot of them to say, oh my God, now I can go on the phone because now I sound the way I want to sound. One of the things that I've learned, which again, the group that I was with yesterday were pretty keen on, is language evolves. And not to be diminishing of the trainers that I've met in this industry, but you can't use a script from 1972 in 2024. You just can't. We don't talk the same way. And you have to be very precise about what you're going to do if you're asking people to do something they don't want to do, which is talk about their money in a very meaningful way. So the evolution of my attachment to the financial services industry is a very big part of why I think I've stayed in it so long.
How did you end up in this specific line of work in the first place? Because if I recall from your story, you started in sales, I think, right? And I mean, you didn't start your career doing this. So fill in, how did you get to this point where you are now training salespeople on how to set appointments over the phone?
I started out life as a psychiatric occupational therapist.
Okay.
Yes, I have a bachelor's degree in occupational therapy. And I worked in a couple of very good hospitals in New York. And I worked on a borderline personality disorder unit when that personality diagnosis was being formulated by a very famous psychiatrist who was working on our floor. And the interviews were being recorded, and he was writing the first book on how to identify this personality disorder. So I was on a research unit, and borderlines are very difficult people because they don't get medicated. And, they walk amongst us. They're presidents of companies. They're, very high functioning, intelligent, charming people who also have a very dark side, hence the phrase borderline. And they vacillate. And they make the people that love them crazy, to be honest. And that was a very challenging job, even though it was highly rewarding. It was also very emotionally exhausting. So then I worked in a local hospital. And then I realized I didn't like doing this anymore. So like most people, what do you do when you leave the career you thought you went to college for? You bartend. I bartended. You can make a mean martini because that's what my dad used to drink. And so after bartending, I got recruited into sales by a kitchen refacing company. Again, a very new concept at the time. And the woman who hired me was in love with me, but didn't know how to train me. So I got shipped to a man in Pittsburgh who has passed away since then. And this man became a very important part of my life because he turned an occupational therapist into a salesperson. And he realized that my psychiatric background was very helpful because one of the things that he made me do was go out on appointments with his very talented people from 10 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock at night. Then he'd sit me down and start telling me, here's what you saw. It's actually very structured, which is the same thing I do as a teacher. I say, you know how you talk on the phone? Well, here's a script and this is how it's structured. And they're like, oh, so sales is not random. It looks natural if you're really good at it. But he was teaching me the structure of a sales appointment. In the process of that, the company president was called by this man, and he said, this woman needs to be your director of training. So I became the director of training for the company, and we had locations all over the country, but then they expanded into franchising, and our training became quite serious. Every organization had a phone room, a telephone advertising department. We called it the TAD room. And everybody who was a salesperson walked in the morning and got handed confirmed appointments with directions, because there was no GPS, which we would have a confirmer who was a specialized person do that on the phone and get directions from the homeowner. So all of this, I learned marketing, I learned appointment setting, I was taught how to sell, teach people how to sell, and I became the director of training for all of these franchisees. At some point, I couldn't do it anymore. And when I left, I was chatting with a friend of mine who was also in sales. And I said, this is all the things that we did. And she said, I need some help with my phoning. And I sat and I helped her. And she said, oh my God, people don't train them on this. You should do this. So it was literally a friend in New York who was a salesperson that I helped with her phoning, who said, there aren't any phone teachers out here. So I started advertising myself from one slice of what I had done as a director of training. And it turned out there weren't any phone teachers. They were just the people that we had trained at our company, which has since been bought out by Sears, who got bought out by Home Depot, whatever. It was the first kitchen refacing company in the country. So what was so interesting is that when I started cold calling, I would take, again, shows you how old I am, the Sales Help Wanted section of the Sunday Times, which is now incorporated into the main part of it. And I would sit on Sunday and highlight all the direct sales companies looking for help. And I would call them and say, I want to speak to your director of training. And I would say, I train direct sales people on how to get on the phone and set an appointment so they have an opportunity to make a sale. That was my message. And I started getting attention from a variety of companies. I had a restaurant company. I had a podiatrist call me and I said, people, when their feet hurt, come to you. You don't have to make calls. People in medicine have people come to them. But in the end, when I called financial services company, literally the director of training at a particular company in New York, she said to me on the phone, "How fast can you get here?" And I was like, wow, nobody said that to me before. And that was the reaction I was getting from financial services companies. So I started only calling them, and then they became my target market.
So tell me about, I want to zero in on when you were making this transition from occupational therapist to bartender to salesperson. I think a lot of people listening to this can identify with, I'm at a point in my career, my working life where, I don't think I want to continue doing the thing that I am doing. So then it becomes a question of, well, then what's next? What do I go do? I guess I'm specifically curious about when you're bartending, what was it about sales that either appealed to you, or what did you think about sales at the time? I mean, how did you land on that being the next thing that you were going to try? And what were some of your thoughts about that transition?
I actually worked at a place that was a club on the weekends. And during the week, they served meals at the bar. And I was feeding, because I was working, I think it was a Monday midday shift, which is not very lucrative, by the way, when you're a bartender. But there would be people who would come in and have lunch at the bar. And this one man came in, and he was working for the kitchen refacing company in Rockland County, which is where I lived. And he's just, we were chatting because there weren't a lot of people there. And he looked at me and said, "You would be so great in sales." And I knew I wasn't going to be a bartender the rest of my life, because it turns out that the woman who owned the place was getting complaints from the other women because I wouldn't flirt with the customers because I was married. I was just bartending. I was not flirting. I wasn't wearing low-cut shirts and leaning on the bar forward when I was serving people. And the other girls got pissed because I was not getting enough tips, which was shared at the end of the night. And the owner said, "I hate to tell you, but I have to fire you. The other bartenders are mad because you won't flirt with people." And I said, "No, I won't. I'm not going to flirt." So that's how my bartending career ended, is I refused to wear low-cut blouses and flirt with men because I was a married woman. And, I was married at the time to somebody who was very flexible about whatever the hell I was doing. He had a steady job. And I said, "I think I'm going to try this." So he got me the interview with the owner, who was very charming. I mean, she was an adorable, lovely woman. It turned out the more I learned about the business, the more I got better at what I was doing. I realized she was a little bit ditzy, and the home office was annoyed with her because she didn't seem to be able to make enough sales. I did not know how to sell. She sent me to Pittsburgh. I came back and I went on 30 appointments and I made 29 sales. Like, I literally learned how to become a salesperson from a man who knew how to train me overnight. Now, he would charge the other dealers if they sent their, pathetic salespeople like I was. And he literally, talk about Cinderella story, from ashes to, I just walked in. I was insane. I finally knew what I was doing. I called him from the airport. When you used to have to go to a public booth and throw money in to talk to somebody? I called him. He was very hard to get on the phone. I said to the lady at the desk, "Tell Maurice I need to talk to him." And he got on the phone, and I'm getting chills remembering this moment in my life. And I whispered to him on the phone, "I got it." And he said, "I know you did, sweetie." I was nuts. I was so happy. I know what I'm doing. And it was like he reorganized my presentation book. He showed me what to listen for. I'm not stupid. I'm an educated person, and I wanted desperately to be good at this. And the woman I worked for was like ecstatic. I started raking in sales like, a chipmunk chewing on a piece of wood. It was like I knew what I was doing. I was nuts. And I was happy because I was making money for her, for me. If these people were having kitchens, everybody's happy when you sell them something they genuinely want. And I didn't know what I was doing wrong. And then I started understanding the science of sales. And that was such a revelation in my life. When I remember that phone call to this day, I get chills. That man changed my life. You can change anybody's life by teaching them how to do something well. And then I became a trainer. He is my mentor in life, this wonderful man. And that's why I became such a great trainer.
Okay, so now let's look at this period for the last 30, 35 years. And I mean, I want to understand, when I look at that amount of time, well, first of all, I'm 30 years old. So it's hard to imagine someone honing their craft in pursuing a career and doing it for that period of time. I really admire it. I want you to know that. And I'm also curious as to, it's like, why? So what was it about this career path? What was it about the actual work that you have been doing for 30 to 35 years? What was important to you about the work? What was it that kept you coming back to it?
Well, lucky for you, it just happened yesterday. And I just came back from a full-day seminar. This man changed my life by teaching me how to be skillful at something that was pivotal in my life for my career. He taught me how to sell. And then I became a trainer and I learned the entire selling process. And like I said, when my friend honed in on, nobody knows how to teach phoning. And I worked for a company where you had all these phone directors who were running hundreds of telemarketers who were calling people about refacing. I started learning to hone in on that craft. And I realized how rare it was. When I train one person or 400 people, if I'm in a conference, and I teach them how to do something that is pivotal to their success, I am the Maurice in their lives. And I know how much he changed my life. And people thanking me and saying, oh my God, I get it. That light bulb feeling, I never forgot. And I do that for people. I become their Maurice. And it means so much to me that people come up to me and say, oh my God, now I really feel like I can make these calls. Something they dreaded that was pivotal to their career success. Whoa, I know how to get an appointment. It's a big deal. Me being able to do that keeps me going for 30 years, literally. It's a joy to make people, I watch their eyes. I could see the evolution of them going, oh my God, look what we know now. Yes, I should be saying it that way. And I have become a tremendous wordsmith around how exact wording, which again, I learned from Maurice, changes the way people think about what you're talking about. It's called selling. It's called appointment setting. It's called being a parent. It's called trying to communicate with your spouse. And that's why I was able to write books, because what I can't do is edit my books and let them go, because I keep editing. And finally my editor just goes, give me a book, Gail. Just give me something. We'll just stop it, because I can keep perfecting it, because my brain is like a walking dictionary. Words are always popping in my head the way other weird thoughts are popping in other people's heads, I guess.
I mean, you didn't use this specific word, but I just think of the word impact, in that the work that you have been doing for the last 30 to 35 years has a direct impact on people's lives, potentially. I mean, like you said, you are training them a skill and a skill set that they can use, just like propelled you in your life, in your career, to create a 30 to 35 year run of their own. And I mean, I've got to imagine one of the reasons, as I told you, I wanted to talk to you specifically was you are at a point where you could retire. You could stop doing this work. And yet you have made the choice not to. If the opportunities are there and present themselves, you're going to keep doing it. And I feel like, at least for me, that is a goal that I have in life. I want to get to a point where I could be of the age or financial status where I could potentially stop working. I don't think I want to. I don't think I want to get to that point. I want to find work in a career that has impact, that feels fulfilling, that keeps me, sort of filled up. So, I mean, is that why you've chosen to not stop, to not hang it up yet?
I think when you love something, you don't give it up. I love what I do. I love the people that I work with. Like I said, I totally admire financial advisors and people who plunge headfirst off a diving board, into the pool, not knowing whether they can even swim. I teach them how to swim so they can make money. It's like, it's really, like you said, to be impactful into somebody's career. When I see people's eyes light up, looking at the verbiage that I recommend and why these words work and why you don't use all those other gobbledygook words that you think you should use, and explaining the understanding of literally a 45-second or less script on the phone, but let's call it words on the phone. It's like the Pledge of Allegiance. It's pretty good. We haven't changed it in a long time because the words are good. And I do make an analogy to the Pledge of Allegiance. If it's good and it's short, leave it alone. It's fine. Don't fuss with it. And, you know, there's so many people who have written me love letters. I have a box of them, which I took with me when we moved from New York to Tennessee, because they mean so much to me. This man changed my life, and I am doing the same thing. I'm changing people's lives. If you can't get an appointment, I don't care how good a financial advisor you are. You got nothing. If you're a salesperson and you can't get in the door, you got nothing. And that's the door that I open up. And I know how to sort of teach sales, but most of the people that come to me are great at sales and not getting enough appointments. I was both. She had appointments and I couldn't sell them. That was worse, actually. But I'm dealing with people who love their industry, really want to work with other Americans on their financial goals and dreams, and they're not empty words to these people. And they want to help people send their kids to college. They want to retire with money, and they're real. And they can't get in the door. And I just gave them a key. It's so important to me how they feel. And I love watching their faces light up. When they're sitting in the room, they go, oh, I can do that. I go, of course you can. You understand annuities. This is easy. You know, this is 45 seconds or less. I talk about it all day. That's how important it is. But that's what keeps me going. When people call me and say, will you come to the agency? Will you do a Zoom meeting? Will you do a coaching session? Yeah. Because it's opening the door that I remember feeling closed about when I lacked a skill that I desperately wanted to be successful. I really wanted to sell kitchens. You know, I've redone all of the ones in my houses. I'm pretty good at it. But I couldn't get people to close. I didn't understand what I was doing. These people are in that same, it's like it's a skill log jam. And I'm opening it up. And it makes me happy.
And I mean, isn't that all of our goal or intention with the work that we do is to be happy, to help us build a life and a lifestyle that is meaningful and brings happiness to our lives? So I feel like, from my perspective and from many of the conversations that I've had with people, that's what we're looking for in life. That's what we're looking for out of our work. We want it to bring meaning. Impact is great. That's a bonus. We want it, to make us happy, to allow us to build the lifestyle that we want. What's interesting, though, is it feels like a lot of traditional advice is, okay, well, if you're at this point where you're trying to figure out what you want to do in your career, let's think about, what do you love? What are you passionate about? What do you spend your time doing? And let's think about how we can turn that into your career. With your story, if I'm understanding correctly, you weren't necessarily sitting around like, you know what, I am just so passionate and I love sales and that this is what I know I want to do. So I guess to turn this into a question, what do you think about some of that traditional advice around following your passion or following what you love and trying to make that into your career? Because that wasn't necessarily the route that you took, and yet I feel like you ended with the result that we're all looking for.
Yeah, sometimes it's not easy because remember, I did go to school for occupational therapy. I did love the work that I was doing, but I got burned out because, I think that it's much easier to work with people that say, I'm Jesus in the middle of Central Park, and we give him medication and he stops saying it. And people that I worked with, they're all around us. They are loose. I always say to people, the borderlines walk among us because they're very intelligent people. And the ones that were in the hospital were in for a long time. This was years ago when insurance would pay for long extended stays. It was exhausting emotionally to be with these people. if you have one in your life, that's the person who's emotionally exhausting. That's the narcissist who's smart and charming and makes you crazy. And those people made us crazy. So when I moved to an easier OT job, I was not appreciated by the nurses because they hadn't had an OT for a while. And they made me feel unwelcome. And then I came home. I literally came home and I was crying. And my husband came home. And he said, why are you crying? I said, I hate what I'm doing. He looked at me and said, so quit. You got to be married to somebody who supports you too. So then I quit and I was lost and I bartended. I went to bartender school and I kind of liked it. And when this man said, you'd be great at sales, it never occurred to me. But I had a father-in-law who was a sales and marketing genius. I had a lot of support from him too. The whole family thought I was crazy to walk away from occupational therapy. Like, my God, Gail, you're making nice money. You have a hospital to work at. My ex-husband was getting his social work master's degree, and my father-in-law sat there and said, you stick with it. And when I wasn't making money, he gave me a check because my husband was in school and I wasn't making money. And he said, don't stop. And he handed me a check that was a few months' rent. So that was also helpful, is that I had cheerleaders and champions along the way. And then, of course, when I met Maurice, and he called the owner of the company and said, this woman will be a brilliant trainer. And he said, you're an occupational therapist. When I interviewed with the president, he said, why should I hire you? He thought Maurice was crazy, but he also knew to listen to him because he was crazy smart. And I said, I just think I can help other people break through the way Maurice helped me to break through. I can do this. And because I'm an OT, I know people's psychology the minute they walk in the room, and I can adjust my training to them. And that was true, by the way. I can smell people across the room. I interview everybody who comes to board their horse at our farm because we had one disruptive person. Guess what she was? Yeah. So I said to my husband, please don't let anybody come unless I can let me just meet them. Because if I can smell crazy, I'll let you know. And, people who own horses are crazy anyway. So there's a very high bar that I'm looking for. But the truth is that it mattered that I wanted to like what I was doing. And it took a guy sitting at a bar saying to me, you'd be good in sales, and somebody who was mentoring me saying, you'd be a great trainer, for me to end up where I belonged. I didn't want to go and be a teacher. I could have been a teacher from the time I went to college, but I am a teacher. I'm a very specific business teacher with a very narrow focus. That's really an important skill. And it's just how people's lives go, a series of accidents where you end up in a great place.
So what would your advice be? If someone is listening to this conversation and they are at that sort of inflection point where they recognize, maybe I'm burnt out on the work that I'm doing, whatever it is about their current career choice, they know that it's not the right thing for them. They know it's not the right choice. What would your advice be for them to find what's next?
I do think you have to find your passion and figure out how to make money at it, because all the people that are career changers that come to me for phone help, that's them. I say to them, why did you leave? Fill in the blank. You were selling cars. Why did you leave? You were working, as a police officer. Why did you leave? You were all these people come from very odd places. And that's what they all say to me. I always had an underlying passion to work with people and their money. And then when they, in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, turn around and get hired by these companies with good training programs, they're so happy. So yes, you do need to find your passion, but you have to figure out how to make money at it, because your parents don't want to support you the rest of your life. And just doing something you love and making a little bit at it, if you can afford it. It helps to be married. It helps to have father-in-laws who give you checks. There were a number of people who really carried me along the way. But it does matter, because your life changes. I was a good OT. I'm a great trainer. Because I love it. I love everybody in the room. They know I love them. I'm their cheerleader. They all get my phone number. Call me. Call me anytime. I will be there for you. Because that man was there for me. I've had a lot of people support me along the way. Loving what you do makes the money secondary. You have to be able to wake up and feel good about what you do. Can you imagine a doctor who hates what he's doing, or she? That's not a person I want working on me. And yet they feel obligated to stay in it. And a lot of people feel that way. You don't have to be a doctor who spent 9 years of training. You could be a business person. You could be, a carpenter. I mean, all the people who come to these companies that I work for left something else. Most of them are adults. New children, fresh out of college, are tough to teach this business to.
As we wrap up, I'm curious about, we've mentioned the word passion and talked about it, and you've shared, that you do think it is important that you figure out your passion and find out how to align your work to your passion and something that you can make money doing. I'm curious about the formula for passion. Where do you think passion comes from, or how do we identify it? Because you ended up in a career, you shifted into sales, and then you ended up in training, which has become, it is a passion of yours. At that point where you were choosing what to do next, it seems like you didn't necessarily know it at that time that it was going to be a passion. So when you think about the formula and what makes up passion, what is that for you?
What I tell younger people is try everything. Try everything. If you have a career, if you have a hobby, if there's a class that you think you might want to take, if you're open-minded and flexible, and it does help to have support from the people that love you, whether it's parents, spouses, siblings, whatever. Sometimes you find it, I found it very, very accidentally. My story is a bunch of happy accidents. There's nothing deliberate about what I did that got me into the place that I'm in. Because my deliberation was, I took vocational tests at Northwestern. They said you should be an occupational therapist. I changed schools. I went and graduated from a great OT department at Tufts University. I did it for years, and I turned around and I started crying after doing it for 4 or 5 years. When I came home from work, I was crying. So you don't always know. So I think what I tell young people is give yourself experiences. Just try things. And then if you find something you love, there's always going to be a way to make money at it. My nephew and his wife are organic farmers. They teach at the school. My nephew has a not-for-profit where he teaches at-risk high school kids, but this is what they're passionate about. Even their jobs are different. People who run an organic farm where they sell the produce is not the only way to be an organic farmer. There's more than one way to be a trader. There's more than one way to sell. There's more than one way to teach. I'm not in a classroom. I'm training financial advisors. But if you find the nugget that makes you happy, then if you're open-minded to how to express that nugget, it helps to have somebody sitting at a bar saying to you, you'd be really good in sales. And then somebody saying to the president of the company, she'd be a trainer. Recognize what people who are older than you see in you. They may be the key to something you never thought of, or your parents, by the way, who may be the bigger problem. I have parents that always got out of my way. That helps to have parents that don't tell you what to do, So having a lot of emotional support and allowing yourself to go off the beaten track you thought you wanted to take is the only way to find it.
Gail, thank you for joining me. Thank you for being willing to share your story and experiences and perspective. I found it valuable, and I trust that other people will as well. So thank you.
I appreciate being asked.
It's interesting, if you were to talk to me as many as 7-8 years ago, I had a very different mindset about work and about retirement than I do now. 7 or 8 years ago, I was of the thinking more like Adam, as far as my goal was to get as rich as possible, as soon as possible, so that I could become financially free. I could retire. I could stop working. And I was willing to take some pretty extreme measures in order to get to that finish line, if you will, as soon as I possibly could. Through some circumstance and some life experience, I had some time approaching life with that mindset, and it just didn't feel right. It felt like I was sacrificing experiences. It felt like I was sacrificing things that were going to add meaning to my life in order to be so focused on the money. And every decision was a purely financial decision. Every decision was about someday being able to enjoy the fruits of my labor. And as you may or may not know, one of the core aspects of my story is that my dad passed when he was 50 years old of a heart attack. And his story is one of, just kind of demonstrating that getting to the traditional retirement age at 65, it's not guaranteed. And when you get there, your health isn't guaranteed, your security is not guaranteed. And it just made me rethink a lot of my future and not taking for granted that I'm, one day going to be able to do things that I want to do now. And so that's why I've made a lot of decisions in my life, like deciding to build a van and travel the country for 2.5 years, because that was something that was part of, an ideal retirement for me. And so then I just kind of flipped it and was like, well, how can I bring that aspect of what I would enjoy in retirement now? And I found a way to do it. I'm still working. I'm not retired, but I was able to build a business. I was able to work from the road. And I spent the last 2.5 years going to 49 states and doing some incredible things. And I'm physically, I'm young, I'm active, I can take advantage of, I can go hike and I can do all these different activities. And it's been a really, really meaningful journey. Now, during that time, have I been as financially savvy, if you will, or have I saved as aggressively as some people might suggest that I do? No, I haven't. And I don't have any regrets at all. And as I look at the idea of chapters in life, I'm currently in this very moment in a chapter where we're spending the winter in Alaska. It's dark, it's cold, and I'm doing a little bit more work. I'm making more money than I have in the past couple of years, and I'm doing more saving, and I'm doing more future planning and investing. And that's probably not going to be forever, because there's likely going to become a time when I'm ready to go back and experience and do things that I would like to do in my retirement. And so I guess that's my way of saying that as I've thought about this for myself, I'm more aligned to, at this point in my life, how Gail has successfully found something that she really enjoys doing, so that even though she could retire, even though she could stop working, she's actually chosen not to. That's what I'm striving for. Finding work that both rewards me financially and rewards me in other ways as well, so that I enjoy it, so that I find joy in it. And that just seems like a good recipe to me. Anyway, I didn't necessarily plan a really concrete finish to this series, so this might be it. Over the last 5 episodes, we've taken a look at our work lives from many different angles, from the financial side of things and the passion, and should we work in jobs or pursue different careers or start businesses? When are the times when we should try to make these decisions, and how do we do them? How does retirement fit into this whole equation? As I've shared before, my hope in this series is that I've just challenged you to think a little bit differently, or maybe for the first time or in a new way, about the role that work plays in your life. From my perspective, the more we do that, the better. Because the more we do that, the more we have the opportunity to ensure that the life that we continue to choose moving forward matches the things that we value as our values change. We're not going to be the same people year to year, and who we are now compared to who we were 5 years ago compared to who we're going to be 5 years from now. Those are all very different versions of us. And I think we're doing ourselves a disservice if we don't intentionally pause to reflect and to think about what these different versions of us are seeking in life. So I'd love to hear from you. If this series in any way has made you think differently, maybe it's led you to make some different decisions about your work life, or maybe you're in the process of planning to do something differently, I'd really enjoy hearing any of your stories about how this has changed in a small or big way your relationship to your work life. you can send me an email at aleveldeeperpod@gmail.com, and I'd really enjoy hearing from you. Otherwise, my friend, in maybe a rather anticlimactic fashion, this is the conclusion of this series, What Are We Working For, on a Level Deeper podcast. If this is your first episode, there's 4 other episodes in the series that you could go back to and tune into. You'll see them on the podcast feed, and they have a little bit of a different cover art to them so that you can see which episodes are part of this series. But thanks for joining me. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for following along. I appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.